All right, let's talk about sponsored posts now. Sponsored posts are essentially getting paid by a brand for a creative mention of their company or one of their products. Now, sponsored posts are personally what has worked best for me and for my brand, but again, it might be different for you, but hopefully some of these examples that I'll give you will help you understand how you may be able to incorporate sponsored posts into the type of content that you produce. So some examples might be if you are doing a DIY or a recipe, you can incorporate that brand's product into maybe your supply list, your ingredients, or somehow incorporate that into the DIY that you're producing or the recipe that you're creating. You might be doing a lifestyle post and you can relate that company's product into your life, something that you do with your family, maybe if you're a fashion blogger, something that you wear, something that you use all the time, or maybe just some other type of how-to article. You might also include a product of that company's for a review article, or you might use their product for a giveaway. And in some of those cases, you might find that you're doing more of a product for post type of sponsorship rather than a monetary number like a check or a gift card. When you're first starting out blogging, you might find that the product for post is a little bit easier to get. Often brands are fairly willing to give away some free products for some advertisement with bloggers, so it is a great place to start. It might not always work for you, and you probably don't want to do it long term if you really are trying to make a living off of your blog, but starting out with that product replacement can be a great way to get started. In general, as much as I hate to say it, sponsored posts are often about the numbers. Brands do somewhat care about the numbers on your website, whether you have a huge amount of page views or newsletter subscribers, things like that. But I can attest to the fact that numbers are not everything. I am not a very big website, but I am able to do sponsored posts because I have an engaged audience, I have a niche, and it works for me. So as long as you can prove to brands that you are seeing engagement, that your audience is involved and they care about the content you create and they might be especially interested in that brand, you shouldn't have a problem being able to work with sponsors on your website. So don't let that discourage you. Brands come to bloggers because we're trustworthy. So rather than an ad that you see on television or maybe the sidebar of a website, bloggers can be an authority figure in our niche to provide some kind of trustworthiness or a personal example for a brand. So obviously in that case, you want to make sure that you're only taking on content and brands that you completely believe in and support. So for example, if you are a vegan website, you're obviously not going to want to work with a company that makes leather goods. Your audience wouldn't buy it, they wouldn't believe that it's something that you'd really use or really be interested in. So you always want to make sure that you're true to your brand and you're loyal to your audience. If your audience cares about that product or that company, then that is a good partnership. Otherwise, sometimes you just have to say no, no matter how much money they're offering to pay you. You also want to make sure that when you're working with sponsors, always get a contract. I myself have been burned many times and have learned my lesson. When you commit to a project with a brand, as soon as you've decided on the cost, the timeline, and everything else, you want to make sure you get something in writing that you both sign. So oftentimes, especially with larger companies, the brand will probably send you a contract right off the bat, but if they don't, create one yourself and make sure that you get the contract signed by the partner. That's going to protect both of you in the long run. Also, to protect yourself, you must always follow the FTC guidelines with sponsored posts, disclosing that you were in some way paid to promote that brand. You always want to make sure you do this on your blog as well as on your social media channels. So I've included the link below to learn more about the FTC guidelines. You always do want to make sure you follow those FTC guidelines. Otherwise, you might see fines or even potential legal action. So now let's talk a little bit about how to begin contacting brands. I realize that when you're new to this, it is a little bit scary. It can still be scary for me sometimes too. But when you begin reaching out to sponsors to try to get sponsorships for your website, you can't really be afraid of hearing the word no. The chances are that you are going to send out many pitches and you might only get a few responses, and sometimes it's going to be a no and sometimes it's going to be a yes. So in order to begin finding those sponsorships, I highly recommend thinking of the brands that you would want to work with, no matter how big, how small, and looking into their press releases, their media contacts online, and see if you can find somebody in their marketing department or their PR team or communications, and reach out to them with a pitch describing your brand, how you want to work with them, and say, you know, I have a great idea, I want to work with you, and hopefully you can get a response and start building out a relationship. If you cannot find a specific content, you can always try social media. So on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, you can go on and send a direct message to a brand saying, hi, I'd really like to work with you. Can you please let me know who best to contact to discuss partnership or sponsorship? And more often than not, they will give you some kind of response, so you can at least try to reach out to the appropriate person to get a relationship going. The best case in these types of situations is that you do a sponsored post and everything works out well, and you can continue working with that brand maybe on a monthly or a quarterly basis, so that you have some sort of consistency going on, so you can build out a calendar and keep earning money through your website and not have to stress about your finances so much. And that just about covers the basics of sponsored posts. Again, this is something that works really well for me, and hopefully it'll work for you too. But if not, we still have a lot more to discuss.